We're going to start talking about a little bit more of the massive amounts of real money that is out there. In particular, we'll look at pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, whatever you want to call it, about $25 trillion in assets. And of course, we have to keep in mind, these are some of the same investment strategies of all your banks. And some of you people out there with mutual funds and whatnot, your money will be tied up in these situations. So if this is something that you're looking at and you decide that maybe you're not so much for it, you might want to look at this stuff. Keep in mind also, it's also along the lines of the personal investments of all the people we know very dear and well. And remember that little thing that told us that data is going to be worth a lot more than the commodity that's being consumed? Well, in fact, it's going to be worth so much that the CEO of Cisco tells us it's a $19 trillion data and Internet of Things market. Wow, that is a lot of money. No fire should be comparable to something like that, should it? And of course, what does this generate? We have a jackpot in the casino of your money between these pension funds, of course, and the Internet of Things. Always, of course, these pension funds are in somewhat of more of an issue than they used to be. Starving desperately for more yield and higher returns. Well, it's a marriage made in heaven because they're going to get it all from this. So we talked a little bit about the BCIMC, about 84% of all public sector pensions. Remember the firefighters and everything else. Taking a quick look at some of the people that are on the board directors of BC Hydro, the British Columbia Investment Management Corporation. And it just so happens that some of their top investments, Cisco, TELUS, Itron, are all in a magical partnership, as you can see very clearly on the bottom of the routers that the BC Hydro smart grid system use. We have Itron, TELUS, Hydro, Cisco, they're all in on the game, and magically, look at that, they're all heavily invested. So this is another pension fund. This is called CalPERS. It's one of the world's larger funds. And you can see everything here that they're invested in all these same companies, both on the stock and bond side. It doesn't matter. They're huge investors in all of this. Again, looking for those returns. Duke Energy, Sprint, Qualcomm, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to stop here for a second because I want to just say to you guys that if you have an issue with anything else that's going on the planet, things like with the food supply, anything else, this is the only place you have to look. All your answers are right here. Just go to the biggest pile of money. You find everything you could possibly imagine. So if you have issues, go online, take a look, and you'll discover this. I've showed some, pretty, I guess, higher level, whatever you want to call them, activists, people that are concerned about stuff. They had no idea, and they're like, there it is. And I said, well, yes, it's right there. The money tells you what's happening. So this is CalSTRS, the California teachers, CalPERS, all these funds. Again, they're heavily and hugely invested in, of course, Apple and Google, iPads and everything else. And Google now is a school official. Magically, this giant corporation all of a sudden can turn into a human for the specific and sole purpose of tracking, storing, and selling this data of course, the children. Now, anyone know any teachers in here or collecting a teacher's pension, any of that type of stuff? You know how heavily invested these guys are in replacing you completely in your entirety because of your pesky pensions that you probably shouldn't be entitled to, even though you paid into it. So I love teachers, of course. I think they should be in the schools and everything, but teachers have a tiny problem. They can't keep data in their head in perpetuity about every single child that walks into that school. And I know that they do these surveys and they talk about the fact that 80% of people don't believe that they could actually be replaced with technology. And in fact, I would ask you to take a look around and think for the teachers, smart boards, iPads, it's already happening. And anyone in financial services even, I just came out of banking. I just watch it. Every little move they do, less and less people. So it doesn't matter on the public or private side of the pension. When you start replacing these people with technology, how do people put money in? And how does that keep the whole Ponzi system going? Well, it can't, of course. But of course, some people are going to get rich off of it. These are called charter schools. Netflix is in on the act. Of course, Mr. Bill Gates, the Walton family of Walmart, they're all in on it. Then we have the International Energy Agency. The world, it says, needs $48 trillion in investment to meet its energy needs to 2035. Well, I just wonder where a lot of that energy is going to end up going. I think we know the answer to that. And they have the same refrain because they're all buddies, right? Mr. Gates says governments need to help out. Of course, the IEA needs money from the government, which is you. So, ladies and gentlemen, the pot just gets growing and growing here. We have the $25 trillion pension industry, $48 trillion in new energy that are required. Of course, a lot of that going to data centers, and the Internet of Things, which will require that energy at $19 trillion. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is CalPERS, right on their website. It talks about proxy voting. If you don't know what it is, I'll explain it. But just reading off of their site, it says, it's the primary way we can influence a company's operations, their operations, and corporate governance. So, you know, their boards of directors and whatnot. So basically what it is if let's say I own 40% of a large multinational or whatnot, well, surely you would think that I might be able to have a say in how they work and how they operate. So this is what happens. So we're always told that these corporations are actually taking over the government. Now, they sort of sleep under the same blanket, so it's really not too much of a distance. It's very difference. It's very much blurred, of course. And what I'm going to ask you guys is, what do you think is the largest corporation in Canada? What about BC? Right on the Security and Exchange Commission website for anybody to see. These are for-profit corporations first. Substituting, of course, and what you need to believe is a country, of course. I'm not going to get into all that stuff, but basically there it is. It's all there. That's why they have a revenue agency and a revenue service, because they are about generating revenue. And of course, as the primary shareholders of all those pension funds, who's telling who what to do? Now, we have a little bit of a problem as we're moving forward with our economy, and we have a lot of issues. Ontario's, I think it's actually about $315 to $20 billion in debt now. So, of course, don't think that just because it's over there, you're not going to have any issues with that. And, of course, BC, $76 billion. NDP is talking about Alberta having one of the largest budget deficits. This is all the treasury receipts and income and everything in the United States. So we have all this stuff collapsing, right? So the issue starts to become, if it's a corporation, they have two choices. Raise the prices on their products or services, or, you know, do austerity or cut employees like, you know, some of our larger energy producers are doing as we speak. And this is where this all starts to come in. Ever notice the massive rush that they're having right now to start getting this settled, introduced? We need to make this work now. And of course, I know about technocracy, right? They've been talking about 30s as since the 1930s to control the energy, use it as a currency, whatever way they got to do it. That's what they've been talking about. And ever since the late 70s, Al Gore and his buddies were getting together, talking about that very technocracy and carbon and how are we going to prove to people that this is an issue. Because keep in mind, it's a sales job, right? Fear and greed, those are the two things that sell. So if you're scared enough, you might want to give up your money. So we talked about this a little bit. All these provinces inside their pension funds own all this debt from all these other provinces. And if you go through all the pension funds, you can see these crossing over. California owns BC debt and so on and so on. And at some point in time, and I believe it is very, very close, especially when you look at things that are going on in emerging markets, as well as in Europe and everything, the bond market is going to start to smell a rat. And they're going to start to say, you know what? How is it that you guys are actually going to be able to pay this debt? I don't know if when you issue debt, if I want 5%. I think 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 is going to make me more comfortable for the risk that I'm taking. So what does that do for all the previous bonds? Well, of course, their value goes down because they want to make a better premium. So this pushes the interest rates. Everyone thinks that, you know, the government, they set the rates and this is how, it's not them, it's the market. The market is the boss. And so when these things start to happen, what happens? Well, we have to pay higher taxes. Now, who is the single biggest destroyer of productivity on the planet? The government. Because they suck up all the money and they have the least value to give to people. If you're a government employee, I don't want you to be offended by that. Don't worry about it. I'm just saying those are the numbers. You can look at that historically. And as taxes rise, you reduce liquidity, and it hurts the economy even more, and it just spirals like that. But of course, those guys don't care. They believe that they can actually just issue debt in perpetuity, and they'll always be able to tax you more and more. And you notice that in all your rates and premiums and everything else. Now, this is the interesting part for me. The guys that want the partnerships with the government, and they want all your tax dollars, and you should pay your fair share, and it's about equality, these guys don't even pay taxes. They don't even barely pay taxes. Tech industry alone, you know those clean energy guys helping to save the planet and everything else, $550 billion they've offshored. Mr. Gates alone, the guy who's got $76 billion, must be nice, is offshored $110 billion. Maybe that's how he pays his CEOs $85 million a year and keeps his $76 billion in his pocket. And what is one of the biggest reasons why this happened? Remember, the government allows this. They pass the legislation. They say, yes, you can have this as a tax haven and all this, because when they charge higher taxes, that reduces profits. And when they reduce those profits, it reduces the return on the pension funds. So they're allowing this to happen, and they're looking at you, a lot of you people out there are working 5, 6, 7 months a year just to pay for all this stuff, as the people who are going to shore up the difference. Now, remember, we talked about the Liberals. They declared natural gas as a clean energy source, so we saw this. And, of course, the potential connection with the data centers. Everything's clean and nice and fine there. And this is, folks, where cap and trade comes in. Now, part of what cap and trade is via government legislation, they say the country, the province, a certain section of businesses, whatever, you have a certain amount of carbon you can use. And they reduce that each year. And when they reduce that, what happens? The value of carbon starts going up and up and up. Now, of course, the guys like Goldman Sachs, they can trade all this stuff and make money off the spreads and everything else. And you'll see in all your pension funds that they are a massive holding. And, of course, I would guess by now that most of you know that both sides of the political aisle are heavily sponsored by corporations such as this. So who might have a massive advantage here? Might it be all these companies that are going to be able to sell the carbon back to you because, of course, they're using clean, renewable, fresh, nice, and good energy? So if you're a little grocery store or a coffee shop or a landscaping company or whatever, and they keep telling you, well, the amount of carbon you can use is now 500. Oh, wait, it's 200. Well, you're forced into the market to buying this. So via legislation, they're increasing the value of carbon for the benefit of all these guys. And some of the Goldman guys tell us the largest non-financial commodity in the world, a $10 trillion a year industry. It's about saving the planet, of course. So we hear this word transition all the time. I like this transition that happened. This is down in California. You guys probably saw this on your email box or whatnot, this massive bird-destroying solar farm that they built down there. And I believe actually, Nevada, helping the people like PG&E and Google, who were the primary shareholders of this. Now, of course, these poor companies still needed a $1.5 billion federal loan for the total cost of $2.2 billion. The thing barely even works, right? We see BP, you know, the guys that destroyed the Gulf of Mexico, they're going solar. Enbridge is going solar. TransCanada, all these guys. The transition, folks, is transitioning the money out of your pocket into these guys' hands. They don't care if it's solar. They don't care if it's wind. They don't care if it's nuclear, coal, whatever you're for or against, as long as there's a middleman. Imagine they spent some of these billions and billions of dollars that they're forking out to all this to put 4, 5, 7, 8, 10 solar panels on each house. They're doing it because they're generating the middleman. That's it. They're using your money to make sure that these guys can sell this back. Of course, because they are the primary holdings of pension funds. Now we have our transition friends, right? We have Rachel Notley and Christy Clark, and they went for the climate conference because it's about dealing with climate change, of course. And what did we find out that they actually came out of that conference from? They wanted federal money, more of your tax dollars, for Site C that we don't even really need, that is extremely valuable farmland that could produce a lot of jobs and everything else, to send power to Alberta. In exchange, Alberta says, because they care so much about the environment, that they are going to maybe take that power if they're allowed to build a pipeline through BC. But of course, it's about the climate. Here's Barack Obama. Remember, we're moving up the food chain here. He says, now we've got to accelerate the transition away from dirty energy. Rather than subsidize the past, we should invest in the future. And of course, we have all these agencies like Sierra Club, Greenpeace, your 350.orgs that get all this government money. Of course, they love this guy, right? He's a great guy. And this is his idea of green peace and getting rid of dirty energy. This is what we spend trillions of dollars on. So when we hear these guys talking about caring about the planet, of course, we know it's completely false. In fact, these guys that so many people worship because they say climate change every 4 words, this man is the biggest hypocrite on the planet. A very inconvenient truth is that Mr. Obama, the head of the world's climate change people, says, it shows right here very clearly that the Department of Defense, which he is in control of, is the single largest oil consumer in the world. You should be paying higher taxes because, of course, you drive an SUV or a car or get on a plane. And the Pentagon is the largest single consumer of energy on the planet, of course, for good reasons. Now, we're also told that climate change and terrorism are connected, right? It's literally this catch-all net. It causes everything. It solves everything. It doesn't matter what it is. Here's the UN chief, Ban Ki-moon. It's the cause of the surge of migrants to Europe even. Interesting. They said it was because there was a drought in Syria. Are we sure that's what actually happened, or are you just walking into all these countries that either have oil or you want a pipeline through, which you're supposedly against, and destroying them, and this might be causing the crisis? Maybe. Drought was the cause, they say. So if drought is the cause, here's Libya. Gaddafi, like him or hate him, doesn't matter to me, I really don't care. He was making the man-made river project. He was going to use the aquifers that they had and pipe the water out and grow food to literally feed the entirety of the north of Africa. And what was one of the first things they did? They walked in and completely destroyed it. In fact, they went so far as to poison the aquifers themselves in the name, of course, of dealing with climate change and terrorism. So just a quick fact check. Clouds don't drop bombs on people. This is what the people who say they care about us and the climate say. And here's Obama. He says, for the sake of our children and our future, we must do more to combat climate change. He gets my vote, doesn't he? Absolutely he should. So it's about saving the children, of course, or is it about something else? It's just a game, folks. You're just being lied to. Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, NDP, it does not matter. They are all the same. It's because of these pension funds. They love war. Absolutely. I was going to say they love war to death. So they're heavily invested in Suncor, Exxon, BAE Systems, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, all those companies. Mr. Obama's budget is $573 billion to invade countries and take their hydrocarbons. So imagine even just a fraction of that went actually towards benefiting society, perhaps with solar panels, perhaps with helping people with their energy costs. It's all about money, people. That's it. It's all about return on investment, piles of money. This is just the United States over the last 8 years. It's not talking about UK, Saudi Arabia, any of the other countries, Russia, it doesn't matter. $5 trillion weapons market, $10 trillion a year in hydrocarbons and carbon taxes, the Internet of Things, the pension funds, and of course, the energy sector looking for all of your money so these guys can make a fortune. They even want to go so far as for guys like me or people like you that may have started to figure this stuff out to put us in jail because there's way too much money on the line. We can't even talk about this stuff anymore. Otherwise, we're going to go to jail. We have Mr. Suzuki here. I live in a modest place. I have a modest car. I like to grow my own food. He has 5 houses, flies all over the world, and wants to tell me that I should be in jail because, of course, I use too much carbon. That's illegal, or wants to be illegal, but of course this is legal. Here we have bombing all those countries that have been completely destroyed. This is, of course, how we stop climate change, isn't it? We completely destroy Syria and Iraq because those guys said, no, you're not going to build a pipeline through here. But of course, Obama's the hero for canceling Keystone. So we have to start thinking about some things, people. This is the United States, part of their pension system. They have Medicare and Social Security. This is a huge reflection of a lot of what's going on there in the municipal level and the state level and the same things that are going to start creeping up into Canada. And I believe all this stuff is just a huge distraction away from this huge problem that they don't want to tell you guys about. So maybe some of you have been watching this and saying, yeah, well, I wouldn't mind some returns on my technology investments. That's good. I want to make sure everything's good with the pension funds. It's not. It's ugly. And keep in mind that these guys own a lot of that debt that we were talking about that's going to have a lot of issues. So what my concern is, these guys have basically messed up the pensions or want to. We have issues in our education. Healthcare is a mess, right? We're always looking for more money. It's not about having healthier people. It's just who's going to pay for all the sickness. We have all these issues in our environment. God knows what's happening with the high yield energy debt that's out there and how these guys are going to pay, what our banks' exposures are, what our pension funds' exposures are. We have issues with our food supply. God knows what's in it and what they're telling us is in it, because, of course, they would never lie. They would only lie about all these things, but when it comes to climate change, they're telling the 100% truth because it's based on science, of course. How about our water supply? There's probably lead in all the water on the planet for now, for God knows where all that stuff is. They lied to us about subprime finance. We got subprime auto coming out now. We have basically subprime student debt. God knows who's going to pay that. And of course, we're constantly at war. So they're magically going to introduce carbon taxes, fix all this, these basic systems, and control the weather. Isn't that interesting how that works? So what's your return on investment? You get the microwave radiation, you get massive higher bills, constantly at war. We got fires, we got to pay for the power for the big data and pay for the data centers that are tracked and used to spy on us. And of course, these guys make a fortune. But now we're going to get to the top of the monetary pyramid. And I'm going to ask you guys, who do you guys think it is? Top of the food chain. I was going to say maybe the Queen, right? Maybe it's Rothschild, sure. Okay. Last night we heard aliens, so that was cool. That was very interesting. The Vatican, okay, it could be the Pope. These are all great answers, and somewhere down the line they could be true. Central bankers, of course, sure. Let's let BC Hydro tell us. It's you. It's all you people in this room and everybody outside of it. Every time you make an investment decision, who cares about voting, right? Doesn't matter really anymore. It's about what you do every day, not one day in every 4 years, voting in this guy or this girl. It's how many times you buy and throw out those phones. How many times you say, yes, I want this data package, even though I don't need it. How many times you need to buy a new iPad for everybody that lives in your house constantly and throw it out and do all these things. How many times that you say, you know what, that smart meter issue, there's no big deal. Those guys are just conspiracy theorists. What does it even matter? It's all about you. This is what we do. We absolve our responsibility onto these politicians who lie to us decade after decade, and we expect a different result. We switch from the blue guy, then it's the red guy, then it's the orange guys. What happens? You know what happens because you know who all these people are beholden to. The exact same thing. More debt, more war, higher fees, higher prices, all these issues that never seem to go away because none of these guys care. It's never mattered to them. It's about getting elected, getting their payoffs, and doing whatever it takes to make industry and their for-profit corporations happy. So this is about responsibility. I like this line here. It says, no single drop of water thinks it is responsible for the flood. Nobody in here thinks they have an issue. They can buy as many phones as they want. They can drive around in their big truck or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. There's very simple things that all of us can do. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the question and answer. And I really just want to thank you for your time and hearing me speak tonight. Thank you. Okay, so we can definitely do some Q&A. I'm sure, I'm hopeful that you guys have some questions. In fact, now keep in mind, I was talking to some people about this earlier that there's so many of these issues, and it really seems very overwhelming, and I get that for a lot of people. The one issue that I point to for sure, there's always these things out there, and it just seems like the main purpose is to divide everybody. Climate change. What does it matter what you believe in? Really, like really and truly. They don't care. Oh, it's real, it's fake. Doesn't matter. They're making money. So they sit there and they say, oh, it's real, it's fake, and they have all these groups. They fund both sides, right? They pay the money for this study and they pay the money for that study. It's just all about being confused and disorientated and not knowing what's going on. And here we have these 10 trillion and 48 trillion and $25 trillion markets. When you can see through the fog and the fuzz and everything, this is what you start to learn and understand. And this is part of why, as we showed earlier, that they don't want people talking about this stuff. So if you have any questions, what I'll basically do, if you can't hear, is I'll just repeat what somebody said because we don't have a mic. Go ahead, Don.